The wind had been chasing June Carter for 3 weeks. It pushed her from town to town, across gullies and dry riverbeds, whispering things she tried not to believe. When her horse finally limped into the valley below the Sierra foothills, June decided she'd had enough running. Her last $15 sat folded in her vest pocket, soft from being counted too often. Ahead, at the edge of a forgotten trail, stood a hand-painted sign nailed to a leaning post. Cabin for sale. $15. As is. She laughed out loud. As is, she muttered. Ain't we all? The cabin looked like it had survived more storms than prayers. The roof sagged, boards warped, windows blind with dust. The chimney leaned like an old drunk who'd seen too much of life. Still, something about it made June stop. It wasn't beauty, it was stubbornness. The place was still standing when it had no right to be. She swung off her horse, boots sinking into the dry earth, and pushed open the door. It groaned, like an old dog disturbed from sleep. The smell of cedar and old smoke met her tired, but honest. Inside, light fell through cracks like gold spilled from heaven. A single chair lay on its side, a table missing one leg, a stone hearth blackened with history. Dust hung in the air like ghosts waiting for company. June walked slow, fingertips tracing the wall. Well, you're uglier than sin, she said softly, but I've seen worse. She set her saddlebag down and turned a slow circle, studying the corners. No rats, no rattlesnakes, just silence. That was enough. $15, she whispered. Guess that's what a second chance costs nowadays. And Will, the man who sold it to her, was named Harris, though he didn't look like he trusted names. He met her at the old trading post the next morning. Hat low, ledger in hand. Ain't worth much, he warned. Roof leaks, stoves cracked, foundations got termites. June signed anyway, her handwriting steady. Don't need much worth, she said. Just needs to stay upright. Harris studied her for a beat, then handed over the key, a rusted thing that looked like it hadn't turned in years. Lady, he said, you're buying yourself trouble. Good, she said. I miss company. June spent the first night in the cabin, listening to the wind crawl through the rafters. It made the place sing, not a song of peace, but something older, like memory. She lay by the cold hearth, wrapped in her coat, hat tipped over her eyes. Outside, coyotes called across the valley, lonely and wild. For the first time in months, she didn't feel smaller than the night. She felt part of it. The walls might lean, the boards might creak, but the cabin hadn't quit yet. Neither had she. Sleep came easy, and it came kind. Morning revealed what darkness had hidden. The roof leaked in 3 spots. One window was cracked, and a family of sparrows had claimed the rafters as their own. June laughed at the sight. Guess we're roommates, she told them. She made coffee over a small fire in the hearth, the smoke curling through gaps in the chimney. Outside, the valley stretched in quiet gold. The hills were scarred from old logging, stumps like gravestones in the distance. But between them, wildflowers pushed through the dust, stubborn as hope. June sipped her coffee and nodded. Good enough. Work began slow. She fixed the door first, wedging the hinges with bits of metal she'd found in the shed. Then she patched the roof with tarp and nails scavenged from the fence. Her hands blistered, her shoulders burned, but the rhythm of repair felt holy, every hammer swing a prayer, every board a heartbeat. When she wasn't working, she talked to the cabin like it was a tired friend, learning to stand again. You got a spine, she'd say. Don't let the wind tell you otherwise. It never answered, but somehow, it always listened. One afternoon, while cleaning the hearth, she found a small tin box wedged behind a loose brick. It was rusted shut, but curiosity was stronger than caution. She pried it open with her knife. Inside were letters, yellowed and tied with string. The handwriting was delicate, feminine, The ink faded, but legible. The first one began, "To my dearest Martha, if you ever find this, I want you to know the house still stands." June frowned, turning the page. The next was dated 20 years earlier. Whoever wrote them had loved this place once. Maybe still did. She read until the sun dipped behind the ridge. The letters told of a woman named Martha Lee who had built the cabin with her husband after the war. They'd raised a daughter here, planted a garden, and believed the land would forgive them for trying. But one winter had taken both husband and child, leaving Martha alone with the snow and silence. The last letter ended without a signature, just a line that said, "I'll leave the key in the tin, for whoever needs a home more than I do." June closed her eyes. Guess I found it. That night, rain came. Not the gentle kind, a full mountain storm that battered the roof like fists. June scrambled to move her bedroll away from the leaks, laughing through her curses. Water dripped through the ceiling and down her hair. "You're leaking worse than me," she shouted at the cabin. Lightning flashed, turning the room white for a heartbeat, and in that flash she saw something, a woman's outline by the window, watching. When the light faded, it was gone. June's breath caught. "Martha?" she whispered. The only answer was rain. By morning, the storm had passed. The air smelled clean, washed of its sorrow. June stepped outside, stretching sore muscles. The valley shimmered under fresh sunlight. Puddles like mirrors scattered across the dirt. Her horse snorted by the fence, unimpressed by ghosts or storms. "You and me both," she said. But as she turned toward the cabin, she noticed something odd. The old flower bed by the porch, dead and dry for decades, now had a single sprout pushing through the soil. "Well, Martha," she said softly, "looks like you're still gardening." June worked harder after that, as if the place itself expected it. She repaired the porch rail, cleared brush, and built a fence sturdy enough to hold a dream. In the evenings, she'd sit by the hearth and read one of Martha's letters aloud, her voice filling the space between past and present. "You did good," she'd tell the woman she'd never met. "You kept this place alive longer than anyone had the right to. And maybe, somewhere between the wind and the crackle of fire, the house seemed to sigh in gratitude." On the third week, June rode into town for supplies. Folks at the general store recognized her now, the quiet cowgirl who'd bought the ghost cabin. Old Mr. Dillon behind the counter grinned as she walked in. "Still standing?" he asked. "Barely," she replied. "But so am I." He chuckled. "You sure it's not haunted?" "If it is," she said, "it's polite about it." She bought nails, lamp oil, and a handful of seeds she didn't plan to use, at least. Not yet. As she mounted her horse, she noticed Harris watching from across the street. He looked uneasy, hat twisted in his hands. "Miss Carter," he called. "That cabin. You found anything inside?" June squinted. "Like what?" "Letters, drawings, maybe a tin box?" Her pulse quickened. "Why?" Harris shifted. "Belonged to my aunt, Martha Lee. We thought she left for the coast. Never heard back." June took a breath. She didn't leave. She left the house standing and waiting. His eyes watered, the kind of grief that comes decades late. "Then you give her more peace than we ever could," he said softly. June tipped her hat. Guess we both owed her that. Back at the cabin, June placed the letters on the mantel. They deserved light, not darkness. She built a small shelf, cleaned every inch of wood, and hung Martha's final note in a frame above the hearth. "For whoever needs a home more than I do." She read it again, and this time, it didn't feel like a message from the dead. It felt like a promise between women who'd never meet but shared the same hunger for belonging. June poured coffee and raised her cup to the empty room. "Here's to second chances," she said. Nights grew colder as autumn settled in. June mended her coat by the fire, humming tunelessly. The sparrows had long gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of wind and pine. Sometimes she'd hear footsteps on the porch, soft, slow, and the smell of wildflowers would drift through the cracks. She didn't feel fear, only company. "You're welcome to stay," she'd whisper. The cabin creaked in answer. It wasn't haunted, it was remembering, and maybe remembering was all ghosts ever wanted. Weeks later, she planted those seeds behind the porch. She didn't expect them to grow. The soil was poor, the sun harsh, but planting was an act of faith, not logic. Each handful of dirt felt like forgiveness. "We'll see," she murmured, pressing the last seed into the ground. That night, she dreamed of a woman standing in sunlight, smiling, holding a bouquet of yellow blooms. When she woke, the air smelled faintly sweet, though no flowers yet grew. June smiled. "I hear you, Martha," she whispered. "I'm listening." By winter, the cabin looked almost respectable. The roof held, the hearth smoked less, and the wind had stopped coming through the cracks. June found peace in the routine chopping wood, fixing hinges, reading old letters, writing new ones she never sent. She didn't feel lonely anymore. Sometimes at dusk, she'd swear she saw movement by the tree line, a flicker of white cloth, a presence watching. But she never turned away. "You stayed for me," she'd say softly. "Now I'll stay for you." Snow came early that year, blanketing the valley in quiet. June stood at the window, coffee steaming in her hands, watching the world turn silver. The cabin's walls held firm against the cold, warm light flickering behind her. She thought of all the miles she'd ridden, all the nights she'd slept under indifferent stars. $15 had bought her more than a roof. It had bought her peace and purpose and the soft weight of belonging. "Guess we're both still standing," she whispered to the room. The fire popped, like it agreed. Outside, in the frozen garden, small green shoots poked through the snow, alive, impossible, defiant. June stepped onto the porch, snow crunching beneath her boots, and smiled. "Well, I'll be," she said. "Looks like the lady upstairs still knows how to grow things." The wind carried her words down the valley and back again, wrapping the cabin in warmth. June tipped her hat toward the mountains. $15, she said softly. "Best bargain I ever made." And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was passing through. She was home. By the time spring crept down from the ridges, the cabin smelled of pine soap and new beginnings. The snow had melted into streams that whispered outside the window, and the garden, Martha's old patch, had turned green again. June woke each morning to the sound of life returning, birds bickering, water laughing, the steady heartbeat of a world remembering itself. She stretched her arms, feeling stronger, less like a drifter, and more like a keeper of something that mattered. For the first time in years, she didn't wake planning to leave. She woke planning what to build next. Her days followed the rhythm of purpose. At sunrise, she'd ride into town for supplies. By noon, she'd mend fences or cut firewood. Evenings belonged to the cabin reading Martha's letters, writing her own beside the fire. She'd begun a small notebook, neat lines describing repairs, seasons, thoughts. "For whoever needs a home after me," she'd written on the first page. Sometimes, she caught herself humming tuneless, low. The sound surprised her. It had been years since she'd made noise, just to fill space. The cabin didn't seem to mind. It hummed along, wood creaking in quiet harmony. One morning while fixing a fence post near the creek, June saw a rider approaching from the west. The sun behind him turned his figure into a shadow, tall, calm, deliberate. Her horse snorted softly, ears twitching. June rested a hand on her revolver, not from fear, but habit. As he drew closer, she saw a young man, maybe 30, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a clean vest that didn't quite fit the dust of travel. His eyes were kind, though tired. He tipped his hat. "Morning, ma'am," I'm looking for the Lee homestead. Heard it was somewhere in this valley. June wiped sweat from her brow, studying him. You're standing on it, she said. The man's face shifted, hope and grief colliding. So it's still here, he murmured. You knew Martha Lee? Not personally, June said. Just her letters. He smiled faintly. Then you know more about her than I ever did. He dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. Name's Thomas Lee. My father was her brother. She disappeared before I was born, but the family always wondered. My mother said she built a place where she could hear the wind think. June smiled softly. She did. Thomas walked the perimeter of the cabin like he was greeting a ghost. He ran a hand along the porch rail, eyes shining with memory he'd borrowed from stories. Hard to believe it's still standing, he said. She must have built it strong. June nodded. Stubborn wood for a stubborn woman. Inside, she showed him the letters, carefully stored on the mantel. He touched them like holy scripture. Her handwriting, he whispered. Mama said it had loops, like music notes. He glanced up. How'd you find this place? June poured coffee, her voice quiet. It found me first. They sat on the porch, the mountains blue and endless around them. Thomas turned the letters over, studying each one like it held a heartbeat. You fixed it up, he said. Looks alive again, June chuckled. The cabin did most of the work. I just kept it company. Thomas smiled, but there was weight behind it. I came looking for closure. Thought maybe I'd find her grave. June's gaze drifted toward the garden. Maybe you did. She's there, in the roots. He followed her look and nodded slowly. Then she's where she wanted to be. For days, Thomas stayed, helping with chores without being asked. He had city hands at first, soft, cautious, but learned fast. Together they replaced the roof's worst shingles, cleared the path to the spring, and repainted the shutters a soft green that caught the morning light. June found herself talking more than usual, telling stories from the trail, from towns that no longer existed. Thomas listened with an attentiveness rare in men. You've been alone a long time, he said one night. She shrugged. Some of us just fit quieter lives, he smiled. Maybe, but not empty ones. One evening, a storm rolled over the ridge. Thunder cracked so sharp it rattled the dishes. They moved quickly, securing the shutters and dragging the chairs from the porch. When it passed, the rain softened into a lullaby. June lit a lamp, the glow spilling across the letters on the mantel. Thomas traced the frame around Martha's final note. You think she was happy here? He asked. June thought for a long moment. I think she found peace. Not the kind that's loud or lasting, but the kind that lets you stop fighting the wind. Thomas nodded, eyes distant. That's all any of us want, isn't it? June smiled faintly. Some of us want fences that hold. Some just want the wind to call us by name. The lamp flickered between them, a soft heartbeat of gold. Outside, the rain eased, and the cabin breathed deeply, boards creaking like a sigh. Thomas stood, hat in hand. You ever think about leaving this place? June's answer came like instinct. Not anymore. He nodded, and the quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind born when two souls recognize the same ache. The next morning, Thomas found June kneeling by the flower bed, dirt on her hands, her face lit by sunrise. The first blossoms had opened small yellow petals, swaying gently. Your aunt's garden finally woke up, she said. Thomas crouched beside her, smiling. She planted marigolds. Said they kept away ghosts. June laughed softly. Then she had a good sense of humor. Thomas touched one of the flowers. Feels like she's still here. June wiped her hands on her jeans. She is. But she's quieter now. For a moment, they both just knelt there, listening to bees hum. In town, rumors spread fast. The quiet cowgirl from the ghost cabin now had company, a man folks didn't know, polite but reserved. Some said he was her kin, others whispered romance. June ignored them. She and Thomas spent their days repairing the barn roof and mending fences, their nights reading by the fire. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her with a look that wasn't curiosity anymore, but something warmer. She didn't return it, not yet. She wasn't sure if her heart could hold another story without breaking the walls she'd finally built straight. One afternoon, Thomas rode into town alone for supplies. He returned late, face pale, eyes troubled. "June," he said quietly, "someone broke into the old storehouse behind the trading post. Harris said they were looking for a map, something Martha might have left." June's jaw tightened. "A map?" He thinks it's rumor, but two men were asking questions about the cabin. June's gaze drifted toward the valley, instincts sharpening. What kind of men? The kind that smell of greed. She stood, brushing dust from her hands. "Then they'll come here next. Some things can't stay buried." That night, June checked her rifle, cleaned the revolver, and bolted the door. Thomas watched her in silence, worry etched deep. "You think they'll really come?" "Maybe not tonight," she said. "But folks get hungry when they think treasure's buried under someone else's peace." He frowned. "You think your ghost letters might lead to gold?" June smiled sadly. "People see what they want to see. They don't believe in stories unless there's a prize attached." She poured 2 cups of coffee and handed him one. "Our job is just to keep what's real safe." They waited through the night, fire burning low. The wind prowled around the cabin like a curious animal, tugging at shutters, whispering warnings. Around midnight, footsteps crunched outside, slow, deliberate. June signaled Thomas to stay low. She eased the curtain aside and saw 2 shadows by the porch. One carried a lantern, the other a shovel. "Told you," she whispered. Thomas's hand went to his pistol, but June shook her head. "We don't start fights we can't finish." Instead, she struck a match, lighting the lamp by the window, a warning glow. The shadows froze, then retreated. By dawn, they were gone. Only footprints in the mud remained, winding back toward the trail. Thomas exhaled, shoulders sagging. "They'll be back." "Maybe," June said. "But they won't find what they're digging for. Martha didn't bury gold." She walked to the mantel, touching the letters. "She buried her grief, her love, her hope, and I reckon that's treasure enough." Thomas smiled faintly. "You talk like a preacher sometimes." June chuckled. "Nah, preachers talk about heaven. I talk about surviving the dirt." The next day, they found the garden trampled. Boot prints cut through the soil, flowers crushed. June knelt, brushing broken petals aside, her jaw tight. "They came back," she murmured. Thomas cursed under his breath. "We'll fix it," she said. "Things that grow once can grow again." They spent the morning replanting, side by side in silence. When it was done, she stood, wiping her hands. "Martha built this place to stand storms," she said, "and storms don't scare me." Thomas looked at her like he'd never seen anything stronger. "You make courage look easy." That evening, they burned a lantern on the porch, a signal not of fear, but defiance. The valley below glowed faintly under the moon, wild and endless. June leaned against the railing, sipping coffee, the warmth seeping through her hands. "You gonna stay after this?" she asked. Thomas looked out toward the ridges. "Maybe I was chasing the past, but maybe it's chasing me back," she smiled. "Then let it catch you here." He met her eyes. "Only if you're part of the catching." June looked away, but her smile stayed. "We'll see what the wind says." The following week, peace returned. The would-be thieves vanished like bad weather. Flowers grew again, stronger than before. Thomas fixed the barn roof while June rebuilt the garden fence, humming. The days blended into quiet contentment. Sometimes she caught herself imagining he might stay for good, his laughter on the porch, his boots by the door. But she knew better than to trust permanence. The West had a way of teaching you that everything you love eventually rides away. Still, for now, she let herself believe in calm. On the last night of spring, they sat by the fire reading Martha's final letter again. The ink was faded, the words simple. If you find this home, treat it gentle. It's made of loss and love in equal parts. June's eyes softened. She wrote that for both of us, I think. Thomas nodded. She must have known the cabin would call another lonely soul one day. Maybe that's all we ever do, June said quietly. Answer calls we didn't know were ours. The fire popped softly, and the walls seemed to hum in agreement. When June blew out the lamp, the cabin settled into darkness, not empty, but full. Outside, the wind carried the scent of new blossoms. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes sang, and the valley answered. Thomas stretched his arm along the back of the chair, close but not touching. June leaned her head against the wall, eyes half closed, heart steady. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, trouble, peace, or something between, but she knew she wouldn't face it alone. The house had found 2 caretakers now, and the past had finally learned to rest. Summer came early that year, heavy and golden. The valley shimmered like a dream too bright to hold. June Carter woke each morning before dawn, when the world was soft and half asleep. Thomas was still there, helping, building, belonging, more each day. Sometimes she'd forget the way his voice sounded the first day they met. It had become part of the cabin's rhythm now, as natural as the creak of wood and the hum of wind. "You ever notice," she said one morning, "that peace is louder than silence?" Thomas smiled. "I notice it when you talk." They'd fallen into a life neither had planned, but both had needed. June tended the garden while Thomas repaired the well. They shared chores, stories, and long pauses that didn't require filling. Some nights he'd read aloud from Martha's letters. Others, she'd write her own by lamplight. One evening, she found him carving something small from cedar. "What's that?" she asked. He looked shy for once. "A key," he said. "Figured this house ought to have one that works." She smiled. "For the door or for me?" He chuckled. "Maybe both." By midsummer, word spread that Harris had passed a quiet death in his sleep. June felt the news like a page-turning. The last person who'd seen the cabin fall apart was gone. "He told me once," Thomas said, "that he sold this place cheap because it gave him bad dreams." June nodded slowly. "Guess it stopped dreaming bad when someone started listening again. That night she left a candle burning on the porch for him. 'You did right, old man,' she whispered. 'You let it find me.'" The flame flickered, a soft thank you, in the dark. As the heat thickened, Thomas rode down to town more often, helping the storekeeper, sending letters to kin. He always came back before dusk. One evening, he returned with a small brown envelope. "Post came from Denver," he said. June frowned. "For me?" "For Martha Lee," he corrected, "but addressed to this cabin." Inside was a single folded page, dated 20 years ago. The ink was smudged but legible. "If anyone finds this, there's something buried beneath the stone by the old oak. Not for riches, but remembrance." June met his eyes. "You ready to find ghosts?" They waited until morning. The air was clear and sweet, the sky the color of tin washed clean. Behind the cabin, the old oak still stood, twisted but proud. Its roots stretched deep, holding secrets tight. June and Thomas dug slow, careful, the earth smelling of memory. After an hour, Thomas's shovel struck wood. He knelt, brushing dirt away from a small cedar box sealed with wax. Inside lay a faded photograph of a young couple, Martha and her husband, and a child with curls like sunlight. Beneath it, a silver locket. June's throat tightened. She left them together. Thomas turned the locket over. Inside was a lock of hair, golden even after all the years. He closed it gently. She didn't bury gold, he said. She buried her heart. June nodded. Sometimes that's the only way to stop it breaking. They reburied the box beneath the tree, covering it with fresh soil and stones. Now she can rest, Thomas said quietly. June touched the ground. She's been resting. We're the ones who needed to learn how. They stood a while in silence, the oak whispering above them like a mother forgiving her children. That evening, the sky opened with rain, warm and sudden. June stood on the porch, letting it soak her hair, her shirt, her spirit. Thomas joined her, hat in hand, eyes shining. "Rain on this land's been waiting as long as she had," he said. June laughed softly. "Then we best not waste it." They danced not well, not planned barefoot in the mud while the cabin watched. The thunder didn't frighten her anymore. It sounded like applause. For the first time since she'd bought the place, June felt completely unalone. Days passed, then weeks. Flowers thickened around the porch, vines climbing the rails like eager hands. June started painting the inside walls one pale color at a time. Thomas built shelves for the books and tools, lined them neatly. "This place doesn't look haunted anymore," he said. "It never was," June replied. "It was just lonely." She paused, brush still in hand. "You ever think loneliness can live inside wood?" He looked around the room, smiling. "If it can, you cured it." One afternoon, a rider came from town with a message. Thomas's mother had fallen ill back east. He folded the letter slowly, eyes shadowed. June read his silence before he spoke. "You gotta go," she said. "She's your blood." "And this?" he asked, voice rough. "This'll be here," June answered. "Martha waited 20 years. I can wait a few months." He shook his head. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," she said, though something deep inside her shifted, tender and uncertain. "I'll keep the place breathing," he smiled, small and grateful. "Then I'll come home when the snow melts." He left the next morning before sunrise. June stood at the fence, arms folded, watching the dust trail fade into the horizon. The world felt bigger again, but not emptier. She turned to the cabin and whispered, "It's just us now, old friend." The walls creaked softly, as if nodding. The days that followed were quiet in a comforting way. She mended the roof again, tended the garden, and read aloud every evening. Sometimes she wrote letters she'd never send, signing them with both names, from June and the cabin. It made her smile. Autumn came with a crispness that cut through the heart like a song half remembered. The leaves around the oak turned amber and gold, falling into piles that caught the light like fire. June spent her mornings collecting them into baskets, using them to mulch the garden. She'd hum under her breath, soft tunes from nowhere. The valley glowed, full of endings that didn't hurt. She'd learned to measure time by chores and seasons, not by loss. Every sunset felt earned, every dawn a small forgiveness. The cabin, once empty, now seemed to breathe in gratitude. One evening she heard hooves on the trail again. Her heart jumped before her thoughts could catch up. She stepped outside, half expecting a ghost, half a promise. Thomas rode up slow, hat low, beard a little thicker, eyes full of the road. "Heard the snow's coming early," he said, dismounting. "Thought I'd beat it home." June folded her arms, pretending not to smile. "You're late. Only by a season," he said. Didn't want to rush peace. They stood there, rain scent in the air. Two people who'd finally stopped searching for where they belonged. Inside, the cabin looked almost new. Thomas whistled softly. "You outdid yourself." June shrugged. "Had good company. She kept me busy." He touched the mantel, where Martha's letters still rested. "You kept her alive." June shook her head. "She kept me." He turned toward her. "Then maybe now it's your turn." She frowned. My turn for what? To write your own story. June smiled. Been doing that one nail and seed at a time. Then maybe, he said, it's time to let someone read it. They spent that winter together, quiet and steady. Snow piled against the porch, soft as wool. The world shrank to firelight and shared chores, coffee in tin mugs, laughter echoing off the beams, silence that didn't sting. Thomas fixed the stove door. June taught him how to make biscuits that didn't break teeth. On nights when the wind howled, they'd sit side by side, reading aloud from the letters until they both dozed off mid-sentence. The cabin no longer creaked, it purred. In late February, Thomas found June outside, standing beneath the oak, eyes closed, face turned toward the first hint of spring. You hear her too? He asked. June smiled without looking. She's quieter now. Guess she's resting for good. He slipped an arm around her shoulders, and she didn't pull away. What'll we do when spring comes? He asked. Same as we did before, she said. Plant something, fix something, remember someone. He chuckled. You make life sound simple. It is, she said, when you stop fighting it. By the time the thaw came, the valley was alive again. New buds pushed through the soil, and birds nested in the eaves. June found an old brass plaque in the shed and polished it until it gleamed. Together they nailed it beside the door. It read, The Lee Cabin 1863, rebuilt 1885. Underneath, in smaller letters, Thomas carved, For those who stayed and those who came back. June traced the words with her fingertip, smiling. That about covers everyone, she said. Almost, he replied. Still gotta add the one who noticed first. That evening, the townsfolk came to visit for the first time. They brought pies, stories, and laughter that filled the house like sunlight. May, from the store, clapped June on the back. We all said you were crazy to buy this place. Guess we were wrong. June smiled. Wouldn't be the first time folks were wrong about a woman. Laughter followed. Rich and warm. Thomas played the fiddle badly, and nobody minded. For the first time, the cabin was full of voices. Not ghosts, not echoes, but life. Even Martha would have approved. Later that night, after the guests rode home, June stood in the doorway, lantern in hand, watching moonlight spill across the valley. Thomas came up beside her. You ever think about what's next? He asked. She tilted her head. This is next. He nodded slowly. Reckon it is. They stood there, the world hushed and kind around them. $15, she whispered, half to herself. Cheapest miracle I ever bought. Thomas chuckled. You paid more than money, she smiled, and got more than I deserved. When dawn came, the sun poured through the window like blessing. June sat at the table, pen in hand, writing her final letter. To whoever finds this place after me, the roof leaks sometimes, and the garden floods in spring. But if you listen close, you'll hear laughter in the boards and kindness in the walls. This house is built from second chances. Take good care of her. She folded the note and placed it in Martha's tin box, beside the letters that had started it all. Then she smiled. Full circle. Years later, travelers passing through the valley still spoke of the cabin that never aged, where wildflowers bloomed even in winter. They said a cowgirl once bought it for $15 and turned it into a home for everyone who'd lost their way. Some swore they saw her ghost on the porch at dusk, hat tipped low, coffee in hand, smiling toward the mountains. But those who knew better said she wasn't haunting the place at all. She'd simply never left. And the cabin, faithful as ever, was still listening to the woman who noticed first.